Okay, welcome back to another day of Excel, Microsoft Excel. Today is going to be day 3, and today we're going to be talking about a few more functions inside of Excel and what a function is, and we're going to have a good time. So, start off by downloading these files, right? Just same as always, but day 3 this time. So once you download those, you can go ahead and open up Excel, right? They'll give you this, and then we're just going to open up this gradebook file, right? This Excel workbook file. So you can go ahead and hit open. Before we do start working on this file here that we have, um, first thing I wanted to talk about was the difference between a formula and a function inside of Excel, right? So a formula is going to be something like what we did with the calculator on day 1, if you can remember that. But it will be something like equals and then like C7 plus B7, right? Just something simple. Formulas are usually simple operations that then you can just put into Excel and it does simply for you and it's nice and easy, right? What a function is it's a predefined thing inside of Excel, such as the if function. This is something that we're going to learn today. If is a function because it takes a logical test and gives you something out based on the input, right? So the syntax or how you write it is a bit different, but they do very similar things, right? We're just analyzing data. That's pretty much what Excel is used for, right? And then there's a few different ways to input or enter a function into our workbook. The one way that is probably the easiest is our formula bar. Just right here, um, into our formula bar, if you click there, then you can add a function just like that. Count is another one that we'll talk about a bit. So you can do that. You can also just click on a cell and start typing directly, and you'll see that it appears in your cell and that it also appears in the formula bar. So it's not really super different. But then the third way is a bit different. It's up here in your formulas tab. So if you click on that, you'll see that this is a ton of functions that Excel has for us, right? So if, the one that I just talked about, you click on if here, and it will pull up this nice little thing on the right-hand side for you. That's called the formula builder. So it's just a nice, easy way to remember, okay, what's my logical test? I want to see if this one is equal to something, and value of true, value of false. So all of these functions over here have their own formula builder. It's a nice, easy way, just so you don't get tripped up when you are inputting your formulas. So you can show this in the class. Just any kind of formula has their own formula builder. And then, sorry, each formula builder has kind of uh, like a summary of what the formula will do for you. So you could even come into the formulas tab and just kind of search around in the formulas and see if there is something that Excel has already built that'll do what you want to do, and it'll do it way faster, right? It's just kind of a predefined thing. And if you can find one that does exactly what you're wanting to do, then it would be a lot easier than doing it manually, right? So that's the advantage of using formulas in Excel. Great. So we'll just X out of that for now. The first thing that we're going to do today, actually on this data here, is make sure you're on the if function sheet of this workbook. And we're going to use what's called the if function, which I talked a little bit about. But in more detail, in this pass column right here, we're going to specify if a certain student, right, passed the class or not, right, because this is their grade book. So this function is super simple. It will be right, equals, this is how all functions start with it, equals, if, and then an open parenthesis, and you'll see that it asks for this logical test first. So what our logical test is going to be their overall grade, which is in this column right here, this K column. If this number is greater than 70%. Okay. So I'd say that's passing, right? 70% or so. So once you have your logical test, then hit comma, and now you'll see that this value, if true, turns blue. So it's asking, okay, if they are passing, if it's more than 70%, what do you want to output? And I'll say, right, quotes, because it's a word, and yes. Okay, so quotes, yes, and then value if false is just the opposite. If they're not passing, right, no. Both of those are in quotes with a comma separating them. And then a close parenthesis, and you're done. And then you can just take that same formula and drag it all the way down. Okay. So that's our first function. That one's pretty easy there. And then for our grade, this is where it'll get a bit more tricky, right? So for this one, we're going to want to use a function called ifs. And ifs is basically the same exact thing as if, just nested inside of itself, right? It's going to say, okay, if you didn't get an A, I'll check if you got a B. If not a B, I'll keep going down the line, C, D. And if not D, we'll give them an F, right? So we're going to want to input our first logical test, what it's going to check first. Something important to kind of explain here is that you wouldn't want to check for an F first. Because if you just say, okay, if they got more than, I don't know, 40%, right, then it would give every single person an F, right? Because they all have more than 40%. And an ifs function is going to take the first logical test that is evaluated as true. Okay? So we just want to be careful about that, that's all. So for our ifs, we're going to take the same overall grade. It'll be nice and easy. And for this one, we'll probably do greater than or equal to. And then we'll do A first, right? So 90%, comma, and then what do we give them if they have an A? Okay. An uppercase A, sure. Okay, and then our next one, you can go ahead and click on that same cell because it's going to be testing that one cell multiple times. Okay, and we'll say greater than or equal to 80%. And 80%, then a B. And again, between each of these different parts of my test, I'm putting a comma. Okay, you can see those. Okay, and then again, K7 greater than or equal to 70%. And then C. So this is a good point where you could show the first two, like A and B, and then give the students some time to kind of figure it out on their own. You know, what do you think you would do to give them a C, D, and an F? Just an idea for an activity here in this class. But I'll just continue finishing this up, 60% D. And then basically it's just like anything else is how I think of it. So like if K7 is less, or yeah, if it's less than 60%, oops, less than 60%, then you'll just give them an F. Okay, go ahead and input that in. See how you did. Okay, I got some F's, C's, and such. We only have one A, so that's okay. Perfect. All right, so that is the if and the ifs. Now in this count and COUNTIF sheet, move over there. And it does have these formulas pre-inputted for us, so that's nice. You could check your work, I guess. You could also help the students to just know. Right, you don't have to copy and paste the formulas over. They're already going to be here for us. Okay, so COUNTIF it will be useful if we're trying to check how many people passed, right? Count and how many are passing, okay? So for this one, we'll want to use equal and COUNTIF for this one. Okay, COUNTIF is the function. And so range, what it's going to check is if they're passing, right? So we already did this. We already did the work. So we're just going to use our work right here, right? That range. So it's going to ask what it's going to look at. So I'm going to do range and then criteria. All right, what is passing? And passing is yes. Just a note about this, make sure that this is exactly spelled like this one was, right? In my if function, I didn't have it, or I had it just all undercase. But if this one is right, uppercase yes, uppercase Y, yes, then just make sure it's exactly that, just so you don't run into any problems. It might not really matter in the long run, but I would just recommend that you figure that out before you get too deep into it. But then you could just go ahead and hit enter, and you'll get the number of people that passed. Okay. Just a little bit about number formatting. If you don't want 15.0, because there's not really half a person in this, you can just go ahead and decrease the decimal value. Okay, so 15 people passed. And now for count A, B, C, D, F, right? For this one, it's actually just going to be the same thing here. So count if, okay, and then range, we're going to use these grades here. But then the difference here is going to be, for our criteria, we want to use what's just right here next to it, right? If it's an A, if it's a B, C, D, or F, and then close that. But then one thing I did forget, you'll want to absolute reference your range so that it doesn't change when you're moving down this column, this P column. Okay, so again, to absolute reference, Command T on both of these, just so our range doesn't change. Within our criteria, we do want that to change, right? We want it to go from A to B to C to D to F. Okay. Once you have that, you can either hit check or just hit enter. And we have 1A and that down, 6 Bs, 6 Cs, 2 Ds, and 3 Fs. Great. Okay. And I'll just decrease the decimals just so it's not 6.0 because that just seems kind of weird to me. So that is count if there. And again, for that one, you could show them how to do like A, count A's, and then just give them time to practice that. Or you could just show them the count if for passing and then have them try out how to do it for the letter grades. But I find that the letter grades is a bit tricky. So you can do that however you want to use that. Okay, so for the average test score passing, we want to basically average this test number here if they are passing, okay, which I think is pretty useful, right? Of the people that passed, what is their average test score? So for this, we're going to use equals average if. Okay, average if is useful in this scenario, and you'll see why a little bit later as we do this. So average if in our range, again, what it's going to check for is if they passed or not, right? So we're going to say, okay, check if they passed. Our criteria will be yes, again. And then the only difference between this and the COUNTIF is that we have this average range. So basically what it's doing, it's checking if in our range the criteria is yes, and then it will average those values. So see how average range is in those brackets? That means it's optional. So if your range is what you want to average, like if it's numbers, just like 1 through 5, and you want to average the numbers that are higher than 3, then you could just close the parenthesis and you'd be fine. But for our case, we don't want to average a bunch of yeses and nos because that doesn't really make sense. It's just text, right? So we want to specify what our average range is. And our average range are these numbers here, right? They're test scores. Um, so once we have our average range, our range and criteria all ready for us, then we just go ahead and hit the check or enter, and we'll get that done for us there, which is very nice. Okay, and I think this is a great spot where you can give them some time to practice for the A's, B's, C, D, and F, because this is very similar to what we did here with the COUNTIF, but it's just with the average test score, including that average range here. But I'll just show how to do that real quick. But I would recommend just giving them some time to try and figure it out on their own. Maybe work with a partner to try and figure this out, but if they're stuck. So COUNTIF this range, and then we'll make that absolute reference so it doesn't move around. And then criteria for this one is going to be A. Oh, whoops. AVERAGEIF. My bad. AVERAGEIF. Oh, okay. And then average range will be this test score again. And for that, we'll want an absolute value again, or absolute reference. Sorry. Okay, and for this one, we'll probably want to have that decimal there, right? Because some of them are like 45.5 or 33.5, and so on and so forth, so on and so forth. So yeah, we could see that, right? Even though these guys got D's, their test score was higher than the ones that got F's. This isn't because someone did it wrong or whatever. You put your function in wrong. You can just kind of look at the data, right? E 36, E 31. So they didn't do great on the test, but they did a whole lot better on the homeworks, right? But then the F students, 36 on the test, but like 0, right, on homework 6 and 1 on homework 5. So this is just a different way that you can kind of analyze your data, right? Okay, and then for the second part of this day 3 lesson, we have this other file. So you can come up to File, Open, and Timesheet. So the basic idea with this file is to kind of just give students practice with having functions in between two sheets, just to kind of teach them that. So like shifts worked, hours worked, average hours per shift. These are all exactly what we've been doing. Um, you can implement these with just the functions that we've been doing so far. So for example, I'll just show one of them. But basically for this timesheet, you can also bring in a couple other functions that you want to teach. It's really up to you as the teacher. Um, one or two more functions, or just kind of depending on the time, how much time you have. You could teach a few more. But for shifts worked, right, it'll be equals COUNTIF. And then when it's asking for range, you can just go into this one and then specify your IDs there. And you'll see that to specify the different sheet, it just has it like in this single quote, week summary. So, yeah. Oh wait, no, sorry. It needs to be this one. Oh, okay, go back. So in these single quotes, it just needs to be the name of the sheet that you're wanting to use for your range and such. Okay, yeah, so just put the comma before you go back. And then our criteria will be in week summary, right? It'll be this ID. Close parentheses, and that should be fine there. Oh, and then this actually will be absolute reference because we don't want that to change, but we do want the ID to change when it goes down. Then you get those there. Yeah, so hours worked, you could use sum if. Sum if works the exact same. So you could teach this one. It's just like average if, but with a range and criteria, and a sum range instead of an average range. And then average hours per shift, all you'll do is just division. I'll show the sum if, just in case you want to teach it. So sum if, range, um, hours worked. I guess that would just be if it's or if it's this person, then we will sum their hours worked. Yeah, I think that should be it. And you can specify these here, that those don't move, close parenthesis, equals. Oh, and then this is because these numbers aren't in the right format yet. So I think these are custom hour, minute, minute. So I think you just have to go in and change the number format, which is another good challenge for the students to kind of figure out that that's why it doesn't come up right when you first input it there. So yeah, hour, minute, minute, and then you'll get the hours worked. Average hours per shift will just be equals, whoops, equals this number divided by how many shifts you worked. Okay. And then bring that down, and it should all be done for you. Okay, so again, this isn't the longest video, but there is quite a few um, points in this timesheet, mostly, or you could do it in the gradebook as well, or you could just bring in a couple other functions that you want to teach, or sorry, formulas. I don't know if I was saying functions the whole time, but formulas here that you can also teach as well. But um, yeah, good luck. See ya.